Hi, my name is DeVaughn Edwards. I'm a former FDA investigator and pharmaceutical industry executive. Today, I'd like to speak with you about communicating with the FDA. Now, if you've had the opportunity to go through an FDA inspection, then you know that at the end of that inspection, there's typically, and hopefully you won't receive one, but more than likely you will, there's typically what they call a FDA 483 form submitted at the conclusion of the inspection. Now, for those who are new, the 483 is basically a list of observations that says these are the areas that we feel you need to improve. Now, that is basically the investigator's opinion, but it typically has a lot of weight because while the FDA was there, they collected the evidence to support their observations. Now, whether you're speaking with the FDA or the MHRA or any other regulatory body, you want to make sure that your responses are timely. Now, I will say this more than once in this presentation, that time is not on your side once you've received some type of communication from the FDA, such as a 483 or a warning letter, which is far more significant. Now, for those who do not know what a warning letter is, a warning letter is just that. It's a warning, and it says that if you do not correct these issues and correct them rapidly, then the next steps will be far more severe. Now, that could mean you may be enjoined or no longer allowed to produce your product. It could also mean that your products will be embargoed, or even worse, it could even mean that you will be prosecuted or someone will be prosecuted. So we don't want to get there. Now, let's talk about communication with the FDA. As I had mentioned before, there are several steps that you should have. And the first is making sure that your submissions are timely. And we'll get into that. But over my time with the FDA and as a pharmaceutical executive, I've come up with 5 critical elements that should be within any communication process. Now, if your procedures do not have some wording to these effect, make sure you take a look at them and incorporate them as needed. Now, I call this the 5S elements. Now, these are the 5S elements that should be in any communication with regulatory bodies. Let's get started. First S. First S is for scope. Now, when you respond to the FDA, your response should assure to the agency that an assessment has been made or will be made to verify that any actions to be taken apply to all areas of similar risk. In other words, if the investigator found out that one of your out-of-specification investigations was deficient, you do not want to just focus on that one example. You should expand the investigation to determine if other deficiencies exist or if it is inherent to your procedures, as your procedures are not robust enough or in some other way deficient. And also state what you would do to address the issue globally. In a sense, this first S could also be defined as systemic, because your actions should be systemic. It should be across the board. If the FDA returns and finds a similar deficiency in another area, it can be considered as a repeat observation. As I mentioned before, when you have these repeat observations, it puts you at risk of getting a warning letter. Now, the next S number 2, stands for specifics. Any actions taken should be communicated in sufficient detail so that there is a mutual opportunity to assess from the FDA's perspective, as well as your company, if the actions are appropriate. If you respond with general statements like, "We will make efforts to improve our processes," or "There will be additional training." Now, these are things that are very general, and they come off as if you put very little thought into your response. There's not a good opportunity for either the FDA or even your upper management, whoever's not involved in the writing of the communication, to determine whether this is going to be sufficient. So make sure that your responses have enough detail. If this is an initial response, you haven't had the opportunity to write specifics, make sure that you state what you will do. You will do a full investigation, gap assessment, and make that determination. And then you follow it up with another communication once you identify the exact details of what you will be doing. Now, S number 3, sustainability. Companies should verify that any corrective action is effective and it's being applied for the long term, that it is sustainable, that is not just a quick fix. Now, a Band-Aid approach is not where you want to focus unless it's part of an interim fix. It's okay to have an interim fix that's in place until you get to your long term, but it should not, an interim fix or a Band-Aid approach should not be your full investigation and corrective action. That's number 4, support. All pharmaceutical companies should assure that there is a sufficient infrastructure in place at their site and with all of their contract service providers to continually remain in compliance. Also, make sure that you've considered whether you have the appropriate resources to maintain changes and corrections. Now, I've seen some companies implement new systems. They buy some very expensive software. They implement new processes. And then they end up doubling the workload of the staff that's already stretched thin. Now, that it may work for a while, but what you're typically doing is setting yourself up for catastrophic failure. Because all it takes is one person on long-term leave, one person or 2 or 3 people having to take leave at the same time, and you're in a situation that's going to be a catastrophe. So make sure you have the infrastructure as well as the resources. And finally, number 5, the S number 5, submission, as I mentioned at the beginning, and I cannot express it more emphatically, how important it is to submit responses timely. As I mentioned earlier, once you've received a 483 or a warning letter, time isn't on your side. If you don't submit your responses timely, you may miss the window of opportunity to have your side of the story reviewed, and it probably will go to either CEDAR or the district office of the investigator that came out to do the inspection. But if you don't put your responses in place, communicate those to the FDA timely, then guess what? You will have missed that window. The only review that will be performed will be the review of the investigator. So if you have something that you said you thought would remediate or mitigate the issues, or if you felt that the investigator was totally wrong, you've just missed that opportunity to explain it to the district. Now, in the case of a field alert, you only have 3 days anyway. From a point of awareness, you have 3 days to submit that information, the field alert form, to the FDA, or else you will have violated yet another regulation. Now, if you or your company could use assistance in responding to the FDA or any other Board of Health, such as MHRA, EMA, or any other regulatory body, feel free to reach out to FDAID.org, and we would be happy to assist you. Thank you.